my recording. So happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope you're doing fantastic today. I've been hearing some really good feedback from many of you that you're keeping busy. So today we're going to be talking about listing presentations, and I'm going to be giving you an overview of Toolkit CMA, which is our Century 21 tool available to us through 21 Online. So we're going to be talking about those things today, but let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, so we're going to start by just going over a couple things. So the first and foremost is, let's say you get a listing appointment. You know, one of the toughest things that you're going to have is once you have the listing appointment, that's the best thing you can have. You know, you have that appointment set. The listers have agreed to meet with you. So, or let's say you're doing a virtual presentation. The wonderful thing about the Toolkit CMA that we're going to talk to you about today is that you can actually use this to be able to do virtual presentations too. So if you have some clients, maybe you are wanting to do a virtual presentation, you can certainly use this as well. The Toolkit CMA will create a tablet presentation for you, or you can email it directly to them. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's say in this case, if the sellers have agreed to a listing presentation, that is the first start. That is the most exciting part of it, because now you actually have your chance of getting in front of that seller. Now, once you've got that chance, now we've got to get the seller to agree to the listing appointment. One thing I always suggest is, as soon as you have a seller that has agreed to meet with you, maybe it's somebody you've met in Publix while waiting in the checkout line, I always make sure to confirm the appointment with the seller by phone. Make sure they know that you have an appointment set up with them. Many people nonchalantly will say, oh yeah, you know, I'll see you on Friday, and maybe they forget about it. You know, people are busy. So we always want to confirm the appointment with the seller and let them know that you'll be dropping off a package to them a couple days prior to your appointment. So we're going to be modifying, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about what would be the normal case before the COVID and what's the normal case now. So before the COVID, we had the luxury of being able to meet with sellers and have a really nice presentation at their dining room table and meet face to face with them. But we don't have that luxury right now. You know, we have a lot of sellers that are hesitant about allowing people in their home for just reasons. And we have also a lot of sellers that are out of town. Maybe they're sheltering in place up in Pennsylvania or wherever it is. So we're going to be talking about what would happen if you're in front of the people and what would happen if you're not in front of somebody. So we're going to be talking about that today. So let's get back to our presentation. So I like to divide my listing presentations into two different parts. The first is your pre-listing presentation, and the second is the actual CMA part of your presentation. And we're going to be talking about the distinction between the two. We're also going to be talking about rehearsing and practicing role playing before you meet with that seller, and also how to, and you're also going to want to know how to get to the home. So these are just some planning things of what you want to do prior to your actual appointment with the seller. You know, you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. You never want to go into a listing appointment unprepared. That's why today we're going to be talking about how to prepare yourself by having an actual presentation, having something that you can show the sellers that backs up your list price, that gives, you know, gives good credibility to who you are as a listing agent. So hold on one second. I just want to make sure I've got everybody in. Okay. Feel free to ask any questions, by the way, everybody. So now we're going to get started on the pre-listing piece. So as I said, if this was somebody that you're meeting with in person, let's say that this is before or after the COVID-19, and you actually have the opportunity to sit face to face with a seller, I always like to drop off a pre-listing piece a couple days ahead of time. And what this allows the seller to do is to read about you, your brand, your company, and how you plan to market their home. This pre-marketing or pre-listing piece does not have any of the actual numbers or the comparables or what your suggested list price is. This is only going to be your marketing piece. So think of it as a little bit of a resume or a bio that you're going to give to the sellers a couple days ahead of time that's going to allow them to take some time. You know, they're going to spend less time you know, you're going to have to spend less time selling yourself. So when you're in front of that seller, you're not sitting there looking at a piece of paper, having this pre-listing packet dropped off ahead of time allows them to read about you, write down some questions, get to know you a little bit before your actual meeting with them. They also spend less time staring at a piece of paper and more time looking eye to eye. We don't have a lot of time when we're meeting with sellers. Sometimes we only have about an hour that we have for our listing presentation. So we don't want to spend the entire hour talking about our company and this is who I am and here's some examples of my marketing. That's something we can give to the seller ahead of time so that you spend that 1 hour doing what you need to do to hopefully get the seller to, believe in you and trust you and hopefully be able to get you that listing that you're seeking. It gives the seller a chance to digest information ahead of time, and we advise you to use the Toolkit CMA program available to you. All of you have a really great system called Toolkit CMA, and I'm going to show you in just a second how to access that, but it's a wonderful system that you can use to be able to create these beautiful presentations to be able to give to your sellers. With this Toolkit CMA tool, again, it's free to you. You access it through the 21 online system. It could be used for buyers, sellers, there's pre-listing packets, there's even a template for fine homes and estates if you're doing a high-end listing. You can customize the various presentations with a bio. You can add a resume, a headshot. You can even add testimonials to the back of the presentation as well. So you can really customize this and make this all about you and your marketing. Now, the great part is it's already branded with tons and tons of Century 21 marketing materials. So when I show you in just a minute, you'll see how easy this system is to use and how it's already pretty much set up for you. All you have to do is import the information from the MLS into Toolkit. So, you'll be importing all the comps and things like that into Toolkit, and then the system will actually create a range price suggestion that you could even modify if you want to. The system also creates property flyers. You could even use it to email a presentation to your seller because these presentations are very long. Are very large. Sometimes it's hard to save it to your desktop and email it because a lot of email services or email servers won't send a file that large, but this one allows you to email it directly off the system if you've got a seller you're talking to, or maybe you're dealing with a seller that isn't feeling comfortable meeting right now. So it's something you're going to be emailing to them. It also allows you to create a tablet version of your presentation. So this is a beautiful way of you being able to do those virtual listing presentations without having to necessarily be at the physical house talking to the seller. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what Toolkit is all about. First, I want to start and see if anybody has any questions before I get started. Let me make sure we're all good. If you have any questions, feel free to type it in or just unmute yourself. Let me go back to my screen. Let's see, oops, wrong one. Okay. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Just verify to me that you can see the, let me go back. Can everybody see the dashboard right now? Hopefully you can all see the Century 21 dashboard. Let me make sure you can. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's talk about the dashboard and how to access Toolkit CMA. So if you have ever been in, oops. Let me see about, am I sharing this? Okay, let me go back. Okay. So if you are in your 21 online system, you can access it a couple ways. You can either type it into the search bar. I like to go right to marketing a listing. If you click on the marketing a listing, down here, you'll see the Toolkit CMA right down there. So just click on the Toolkit CMA. This will log you directly into the system. And let me see that, go back. Okay, so this is the dashboard to Toolkit CMA. This is where you're going to be creating your presentation. So this is where you can go in, you can create a presentation, you have your saved presentations over here. You could even create property flyers. So let's say it's a weekend or you need to create a quick open house flyer. You can come right here and be able to do that, no problem. Let me see make sure everybody's in. Okay, good. Okay, so let me go back to this. So one thing I do advise is everybody should do a training on this. Now I'm going to be giving you an overview of Toolkit, but I'm not going to actually show you the step-by-steps of how to import the information from the MLS. But I do think all of you should go right here under support. So when you log into your account under support, you'll be able to set up a one-on-one walkthrough with this. It's very easy to do these. Once you get used to doing a Toolkit CMA, you'll be able to whip these up in 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't take me more than a few minutes to do them. But you want to get a little bit of training as far as a walkthrough with it. So they do that here, and I do believe Century 21 through 21, through Century 21 University also does classes on Toolkit. So take advantage of the classes, the Century 21 classes that actually go detailed, step by step on how to actually create the presentation. But I do want to show you a couple things about this. First of all, under your name is where you can update things like your profile, your photo, you can add a resume, you can add testimonials. So you can actually customize this and make this really nice for you to be able to use in the future and then save those different documents. But I want to show you just how cool this system could be. Let me go back, and before I do that, I just want to make sure I've got everybody in because I have to actually allow people in. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go back. And let me show you. Am I sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, sorry, got lost there. Okay, so let's show you let me pull up my examples. Okay, so this is an example. Hopefully you can all see the presentation on my screen. This is something that I would use as a pre-listing presentation. So this is what I would give to my seller, usually a couple days ahead of time, to be able to look through
Katie,
my, yes.
Are we supposed to be looking at something?
Oh yeah, hold on 1 second. Sorry guys, hold on. Let me try this again. Thank you. Hold on. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
So again, this is an example of what your pre-listing packet or pre-listing part of your presentation is going to look like. So in this one, it goes through. This is all, guys, this is all stuff that's already in the system for you. You are not going through and creating this. I haven't gone through and spent hours creating all these documents. These are already in there for you. So Century 21 has gone in and they've added all this wonderful branding stuff. That's all about Century 21. Why list your home with us? What are we going to do? We give 121%. Also gives lots of statistics about Century 21, the amount of countries we're in, our exposure, how many professionals we have in the industry. It also goes through and talks about a lot of the benefits we have through the various websites and the syndication that we do, to being knowledgeable and well-trained. Every one of these pages is already created. The only thing I've done is I've added my headshot and my information. Also, notice what's on the bottom of every single page of this presentation, my information. So as the seller is going through this presentation and they're reading it and they're taking it all in, they're being reminded over and over again of who this presentation is about. So if I do happen to meet with them the next day, or if I give them a phone call after I've done this presentation, they're already going to be familiar with me. They already know what I look like. They have my contact information, and it's a nice presentation, and it's all about the the brand and where do home buyers come from and the amount of syndication. I also love that they showcase the information and the data in various ways. We all learn in different ways. Some of us like graphs, some of us like statistics. So this is the way that all of us ingest information and are able to to get that. So it's a great way of kind of having other things on there, response times. It's all about us. You can even scale back this. It's quite lengthy if you leave it the way it is. It could be close to 80 pages. You can always scale back some of these pages if there's a couple that you don't feel like you need, or you can, eliminate. You can certainly do that. So that's the marketing piece of the pre-listing presentation. And then there's also a second one, which is your actual this is your actual CMA. So if you can see this is the actual CMA portion of your presentation. Now, the CMA portion of your presentation is going to have all the nitty gritty. This is the comps. This is, you know, the different data that you've pulled from the MLS. This is all the work that you've done looking for specific comps to be able to put into this. With the CMA part of it, this is where it gets a little bit more detailed. You know, now we're looking at properties on the market and under contract and recently sold properties. We're looking at maps of comparable properties. We've got, you know, other ways of showing the information. It even breaks it down into individual properties that are currently on the market, what's recently sold, the sold prices, the price per square foot, all of these important things that we need to know when we're pricing a property. Then when we get close to the bottom, it's going to take all that information and puts it in nice side-by-side comparison so the seller can see what his competition is. It also puts it in different graphs so he can see, you know, mid-range where all the properties fall in. And this is important because we want to educate our sellers during this process of what the market value is. You know, we want our sellers to have a realistic understanding of what we think the market value is. You know, when our seller's telling us that he thinks his property is worth $350,000, and we come to this and we say, well, Mr. Seller, we're not really seeing that properties are selling for that much. You know, 350 might not be what we're going to be able to get for this property because we're not seeing it in the data. So this is something that also helps you with supportive information to be able to get the seller to the price that we believe we can sell it for. Again, some more graphs that tells high, lows, mediums, averages, and then at the bottom or at the last last piece, it comes up with a range price. So now the system is coming up with a range price of what it thinks that we should list the property for. This is also modifiable. So let's say that this particular property, yeah, it looks like we can maybe list it around 269. But this isn't taking into consideration that the property is really, really in bad shape. Maybe it needs a new roof, or, you know, maybe it's dilapidated, or it's not really where it needs to be to get that 269. I can adjust the high end of this list price and maybe adjust it down to 260, or, you know, or maybe adjust the high and the low a little bit. So you're, as an agent, you're able to adjust this as well. Remember, this is your suggested list price. This is the price that you're going to tell the seller that, hey, from my experience and from all the information I've gathered, this is the price that I believe you need to list your property at. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Any questions on any of that we just talked about? Good. Okay, so we're going to keep going then. Let's get back to my presentation. So, oops, hold on one second. Wait, hold on one second, guys. I'm on the wrong thing. Let's go back to share. Where was I? Hold on one second, guys. I got to pull up my presentation again. There it is. Can everybody see my presentation again?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to talk more about the pre-listing package. So again, if we're dealing with post-COVID or pre-COVID days, this is something that you would be meeting with the seller in person. So this is something where you drop off ahead of time and it allows them to get to know you a little bit ahead of time. So instead of spending an hour selling yourself and selling the company, they already know who the company is. They've read all of your information. Now you've got that appointment. Not many agents do this. A lot of agents will simply show up to the listing appointment with everything in hand, which is perfectly fine. You can certainly do that. But by dropping off something ahead of time, it's showing that you take your business seriously and that your reputation is very serious to you. It also allows you to have things, you know, you could prepare these ahead of time. You know, there's agents out there that prepare the pre-listing packets way ahead of time. They have maybe 4 or 5 of them sitting in their vehicle, and whenever they have the opportunity to meet in front of a seller, they drive over to the property, drop it off ahead of time. Hey, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, the pre-listing part of it does not have any of the CMA in it, so this could be somewhat generic that you can drop off ahead of time. What it also does is it deters the seller from canceling with you. So let's say, for example, you have a Friday afternoon appointment at 3 o'clock with the sellers, and they're meeting with 3 other agents ahead of time. They have maybe a Watson agent, a Keller agent, and a Remax agent all ahead of you. So you're the last person on the list to get to meet with the seller. The day before, you drop off your pre-listing packet. So the sellers have had some time to read through it. They see your photo over and over again. They have the opportunity to write some questions down. And now Friday happens. And maybe the very first agent they meet with, they fall in love with. You know, this person is wonderful. She has all the criteria that they're looking for in an agent. So you know what, honey? We're going to go ahead and cancel the rest of the appointments for the day. But wait a minute, you know, we had this one agent that stopped by yesterday. They dropped off this 50 to 60 page document, beautifully bound. I don't feel like we should do that to them. I feel like, you know what, we at least owe it to that agent to give them the chance to meet with us. So I'm not guaranteeing you that it's going to deter them from canceling with you, but what it does is it shows them that you've done some work for them. It creates a little bit of a sense of beholding that, you know what, this person did some work for us. They went above and beyond what all the other agents did, and we at least owe it to them to meet with them before we make our final decision. Okay. And remember, this part of the pre-listing packet does not include price suggestions. You know, the last thing you want to do is drop off the day ahead of time your entire presentation that has your pricing strategy and all your comps and all that hard work. You don't want to give that away just yet. You don't want to bring that until the day of the presentation, because then you're giving away your secrets. If you give them your price suggestion the day before and they cancel with you, guess what? You don't even have the chance to deliver that listing presentation, and they may have used that price to list it with another agent. So one thing I always say is don't drop off the pricing suggestions until your actual listing presentation with the seller. I just want to stop for a second. Any questions? Okay, good. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay. What to include in your pre-listing packet? Well, the sky's the limit. You can do there's already an introduction letter in there, but you can include information about Cariotti. You can include your own resume, a bio. If you have client testimonials that you've gathered over the years, this is something you definitely want to put in there, especially if they're from happy sellers. You know, that's the one thing we want. We want other people saying she was as good as I believe she is. She was professional. She sold her house quickly. She was, timely and great with communication. A lot of agents also include an explanation of how the selling process works. You know, you're trying to make yourself be that local expert as well as the real estate expert. So you want the sellers to come to you. You want to be able to educate them and give them information that they're going to, use. So you want to be somebody that's known as being an expert. So tell them, teach them how the selling process works if this is new to them, or maybe it's a little bit of a different situation. A lot of listing agents also like to include blank copies of what our listing agreements look like, as well as our contracts. Those are standard forms. Just don't fill any of them in, obviously. But what it does is it allows the seller to see these documents that they're hopefully going to eventually be signing without making it so scary. So you know what, Mr. Seller, I just wanted to include with this a copy of the listing presentation that I will be having you sign. Take a look at it. Let me know if you have any questions, because this is the document that you're going to see when we list or sell the home. Also, you could do a marketing plan. Remember, we want to include as much information as possible for the seller to review. So how do you intend to sell this home? Is there web presence? Is there syndication? Are you going to be using the Century 21 unique property sites? Are you going to be utilizing the golden ruler, or maybe the realtor program? Maybe the buyer wants to get a cash offer the seller wants to get a cash offer in 24 hours. A lot of agents can get brownie points by putting a flyer together. So if you're crafty, or you use systems like Canva, or even Toolkit CMA can create a flyer for you, why not include an example of what your marketing flyer is going to look like for that property? Let the sellers see their home on a for sale flyer. How great is it to envision them working with you than to see their home on a flyer with your information on it? Again, psychologically, it reiterates the fact that you are their listing agent. Other things you can do is, how do you intend to sell this home? Are you going to be doing any print marketing? A lot of agents do newspaper, postcards, flyers. Do you have a yard sign? You're going to be doing direct mail to the neighbors or door hangers. Unique property sites, realtor, open houses, broker opens. And these are all things we do to sell properties. Some of you are doing Craigslist ads to generate leads, email campaigns. You can even utilize home staging services. So if you have a property that is sitting vacant and maybe you want the buyers to envision themselves in that property and to have furniture in it, utilize some of these home staging services. Right now, more crucial and more necessary than ever is professional photography and virtual tours. you know, so I think we've had an absolute increase with the amount of listing agents doing Matterport tours. Matterport tours are high-end virtual tours. We actually do them right through our office through Marlon Mora. And you can, you know, take advantage of those, but it allows buyers to do virtual walkthroughs of properties without having to step foot in the properties right now. So you, as a Century 21 Coyote agent, have so many resources available to you through this COVID-19 situation that you can still actively list properties and be able to show them to buyers without having them step foot in the property. Okay, so there's a lot of things, ways that we can get around what's currently happening. Next, we're going to talk about CMAs. So we talked about the pre-listing part of your presentation, and this is your marketing the part. Now we're going to talk about the actual CMA part of your presentation. And if you remember what that looked like, oops, where'd it go? It was right. Hold on, let me go back to it if I can find it. Right here. So this was the, oh, hold on one second. Let me share it again. So this was the actual, I think I pulled up the wrong one, but it was the one that had all the actual pricing on it. So the one that had the pricing on it is the one that is the actual CMA part. Hold on one second. Sorry, guys. I'm all over the place, aren't I? Let me stop sharing this for a second. Let me get back to the right screen. Right here. Nope, that's not it. Hold on. Hold on a second, guys. Okay. That's not it. Hold on. I lost my presentation. Hold on one second, guys. I gotta find where it is. Okay, here it is. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. So now we're talking about the comparative market analysis. So I'm going to give you some suggestions on the type.
Katie.
You can't see it? Okay, hold on one second. Okay, you should be able to see it now. So so I'm going to give you some suggestions on the type of information you're going to pull when you're going to pull comparable properties for a CMA. Again, I'm not going to be showing you the step-by-steps on how to import the information. It's a very easy class you can take on it, but I am going to just kind of give you the basics of what you're going to be looking for. So when you're doing your CMA, this is the part of the presentation that you bring with you to the presentation. You do not leave this or give this to the seller ahead of time. Why? Because you're going to be spending time. This is your secret weapon. This is you going in with all of the work that you did to come up with that wonderful list price that you think is really going to sell this property. You don't want to give that to the seller ahead of time. You want to go over that with them, whether it's on the phone or in person, to be able to present that to them. I've known some listing agents that don't leave that information with the seller. So a lot of times they'll even do it on their iPads and the seller does not get a copy of that CMA. Why? Because who's to say that that seller doesn't then use it with another agent, maybe less experienced, and say, hey, this girl, Katie, came up with a really great CMA. Can you just use her data and list it at her list price? You know, I spent a lot of time doing the CMA and it's not something I really want to, you know, give away. So a lot of agents don't even leave this with the seller. You are going to want to spend time researching the community. It's not just about the numbers, guys. You have to also be a local expert. You need to know in that particular community, are prices increasing or decreasing? Is there something going on in that community that is causing prices to increase? Maybe there's a new, a good school going up or a Trader Joe's or all the different things that make properties increase and decrease. So make sure you know what's trending in that neighborhood. Also, what is the average days on the market? So if you have a community where properties are sitting on the market for a year, you may not want to list it on the high end. You may want to list it a little bit low on the market value range because you're probably not, you don't want to sit it, you know, let it sit for a year on the market. Okay. What is the competition? Do you have a new construction community a mile down the road that's selling properties at the same price while offering incentives and higher commission? What is your competition out there? Because that's going to be important when you're pricing a property. Also, expansion in the community. We talked about schools and shopping. What's going on? You know, I mean, is it Horizon West where there's things going on left and right, or is it a community where maybe there's not a whole lot of expansion going on? And then we talked about the new construction. You also want to think about who your target buyer is for this home. You know, is the property located right near a school? Maybe it's in walking distance to an elementary school. Well, then that would be a great target for you, would be going after maybe families. Demographics, maybe you have a seller that wants to list a property near UCF, or maybe it's in Solavita, which is a 55 and over community. You know the type of demographics of who's looking to buy in that area. Also, area employers, people like companies like Lockheed Martin, Disney, Universal, obviously they're big employers. So, you know, is the property located near one of these attractions? Is the property maybe great for an investors? Does it have a long-term tenant in there, or is it in a great rental community that you can hopefully get a good investor to come in there and buy a property? Or you may have a short-term rental where you've got vacation homeowners that are looking to, instead of spending money on a vacation, they actually want to buy their own home. I like having a suggested price range, $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 difference. The reason why is I don't want to give a seller a definitive price, because it may, you know, depending on their motivation, they may want to list it higher or lower. And here's my reasoning with that. Let's say, for example, I have a property and the property's worth between, my range price it came up with was between 200 and 210. Okay. I know that if the sellers want to sell it fast, they should list it at the low end, right? The 200. But I know that if they want to let it sit on the market for a little bit and maybe get a little more money on it, then we can go ahead and list it at the 210. I like giving sellers the option because it allows them to choose based on their motivation. You know what, Katie, we need to sell this property quick. I've got a new job that I'm starting next month. We don't have time to let it sit on the market. Well, then in that case, that tells me we need to list it on the lower end of that range so we can hopefully get a quick sale. You know, if we can list it in the higher end and still get a quick sale, of course, but, you know, depending on what their motivation is, we may have to go with a little bit on the lower edge of that the market value to get a quick sale for them. The next step after this would be to gather MLS information. So you're going to be going into the MLS, and this is something that does take a little bit of time. You know, if you are in a community where every home is, you know, what we call cookie cutter and every home is exactly the same, it's very easy to pull comps because everything's almost exactly the same. You know, same thing like condos and townhomes where literally the floor plan is the same, everything's exactly the same. Those are easy ones. But the ones that are a little bit more difficult is, let's say, for example, you have a custom home that was built on a lake in St. Cloud, and there's no other homes on that lake that are anywhere close to what this property is. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to try to find acceptable comps. You want to try to stick with the same neighborhood if you can, and the same type of home, whether it's single family home, townhouse, or condo. If you can, you want to try to avoid distressed properties such as short sale and bank owns. However, sometimes we are limited with the amount of comps we have access to. So sometimes those distressed properties will need to be used. You want to include some actives, some pendings, and absolutely solds. Sold properties are going to be the main indicator of what the market value is showing. Because if you think of it like this, you know, a seller can list a property for any price they want to. And as a listing agent, you can pretty much put any property on the MLS without us, you know, calling you and asking you why. But that's not an indicator of what the market value is. The market value is what somebody is willing to pay for the property. So that's why the solds are so important. It's what somebody realistically and factually paid for that home. So we want to look at sold properties usually within 6 months because that's what the appraisers are looking at. We want to kind of mimic what the appraisers are doing, so make sure we have the right price that we come up with. Occasionally you may have to stretch that back to a year if there's no comps, but we try to stick with 6 months. We try to make sure the property is similar in size, and you want to try to get 5 to 10 good comps. If you can get, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 good comps, that is the perfect number to come up with a legitimate list price. If you've only come up with 2 comps, we're not really going to have a realistic list price. We can kind of guess it a little bit, but we don't really have enough data to back up the list price that we came up with. So you want to try to get 5 to 10 good comps. I'm going to stop for a second because I want to just double check to see if anybody has any questions. Everybody good? Any questions or comments or anything? I think we're good. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation. So now we're going to talk about the actual presentation. So you've done your work. You've dropped off your pre-listing packet to the seller the day ahead of time. You spent the time pulling comps from the MLS. You've imported them into Toolkit CMA. You came up with this beautiful CMA that you can give to the seller. Now what? Well, now you're actually going to be doing your listing presentation. So I want to talk to you as if we're doing these in person, but we're going to also talk about how to do this remotely. So if I was doing this in person, you know, I would, or virtually for that matter, practice the presentation ahead of time. Find somebody that can sit there and allow you to do a mock listing presentation. There's a lot of wonderful resources out there for you, like MikeFerry.com, where you can get objection handling scripts. I love the idea of scripts. You know, that's a great way of you being able to overcome objections when you hear them. Just make sure that when you're using scripts that they sound like you. Make sure you're not reading off of a piece of paper. It doesn't sound authentic, and you want to make sure you're sounding, you know, authentic and like it's coming from you. This is something that's a big pet peeve of mine. Make sure you're never late to an appointment with a buyer or a seller. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. It's very disrespectful for their time. Arrive to the neighborhood in advance. You never know when you're going to hit traffic on I-4, or you forgot where the property is, or you had to get gas, or whatever the situation is. Make sure you leave with enough time to get to the property for your listing appointment. In fact, it's advised that you get there 10 minutes prior. I'll tell you a great example. I love David Knox. He's a great real estate guru. I've watched him speak many, many times. And David Knox gives a really, really good example of why you want to be prepared for things like this. And the way that David Knox describes it is when he goes to a listing appointment, he always arrives 10 minutes prior to the appointment. He parks down the road. He doesn't park, you know, where the sellers can see him. Maybe he parks at the clubhouse or just down the road. And he turns his phone off and he just puts it away and he starts to just calm himself. And he maybe goes over objection handling, or maybe there's a pitch that he goes over in his head to make sure that his mind is in the right place. He calms himself. He mentally prepares himself. When it's time for the actual presentation, he pulls up in front of the house, does not park in the driveway, pulls up in front of the house on the street, and at time of the appointment, calmly walks up to the door, knocks on the door, makes eye contact, firm handshake, and introduces himself and his company. Hi, my name is Katie Acosta. I'm with Century 21 Karaoke. Thank you so much for welcoming into your home today. Okay. What this shows the seller is you are calm, you're cool, and you're professional. The last thing you want to do is you show up 10 minutes late, you're flustered, you run up to the property, your phone's vibrating, you haven't even gotten yourself together, you knock on the door, again, 10 minutes late, seller answers the door, and you're just a mess. You know, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm so sorry I'm late. I hit I-4 traffic. Oh, wow, my goodness. Hi, nice to meet you. It's a very different impression. And we all know the expression, first impressions are everything. The impression that I get with the second agent is much different from my impression with the first agent. The first agent is somebody I want to work with. He showed up on time. He presented himself. He made eye contact. He was in the moment. The second agent was flustered and out of it. And this isn't really somebody I want to trust my investment to. You know, you may have already lost it after that 10 minutes of being late. No matter how much you try to hold it together, you were 10 minutes late. And to a seller, that's a little bit of a disrespect. Remember, they may have had to put their dogs in the other room. They may have had to make prior arrangements for childcare. Maybe they cleaned up the house to make it look nice for your arrival. So be respectful. Make sure you always show up on time. Okay, so with your actual listing presentation, you know, we talked about the actual amount of time. You've got about a solid hour is really what you have to sell this seller on why they want to choose you to list your home. You shouldn't need more than 30 minutes for your presentation. Why? Because you've already dropped off the pre-listing packet ahead of time. They've already spent some time reviewing all of your marketing. So now during your actual presentation, you really only need about 30 minutes. And guess what? They already know about your company. They already know your resume. They already have your marketing plan. Now it's time for them to get to know you and to build rapport and hear how you're going to sell their particular home. It also allows you to present your list price and why you came up with that list price and show your supporting data of solds and actives and pending properties. A lot of times I always suggest allow 30 minutes at the end of your presentation for the tour. Save the home tour for last if possible. Every major listing or top listing agent out there will tell you don't do the tour when you first get there. Now I know it's difficult. Sellers get excited. They want to show us their property. They want to show us how great they've done it, all their home improvements. But what this does is, let's say you start off with a tour and you only have 1 hour. Well, people get excited, and sometimes maybe now the seller is showing you all the closets and where they kept their Christmas tree and all the different storage and their fence and all these different things. Now 45 minutes has gone by and you only have 15 minutes left. So if possible, save the home tour for last. Let that be the last thing you look at. That way, if it goes over, you've already gotten the important stuff taken care of, which is your actual presentation. I'm going to stop for just a second because it looks like I have, oh, no, we're good. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so we want to also encourage the seller to keep an open dialogue. Whenever you're having any sort of conversations, whether it's with a buyer or a seller, make sure you're asking open-ended questions. Us as realtors, we like to talk a lot. I'll be the first to admit that I'm very, very chatty. However, it's our time to sit and listen. Let the seller tell you things that they want you to know about that property. Ask open-ended questions. Things like, what is your reason for the move? Do you need to sell fast, or you want to try to get the most money for the home? These are motivational questions. What's your reason for the move? Well, the house is too big, and the kids have all moved out and we need to downsize. Well, this is now your motivation. That maybe you can help them with another purchase if possible. The second question, do you need to sell fast, or do you want to try to get the most for the money? This is your pricing question. This is, do we want to list it on the low end or the high end? Do you need to sell fast, or are you okay letting it sit on the market? If you found out that maybe they're moving up to Pennsylvania to be close to family, or maybe they're relocating for a job, a great question is, do you have an agent to help you with your move to Pennsylvania? No? Let me help you find a great Century 21 agent that'll be able to help you the same way that I'm helping you here. Okay. My favorite question is, what are your favorite features of this home? They're helping you to sell this property. If the seller starts telling you that, I can see the Disney fireworks out of my back porch at night, or, I see the deer running through my yard in the morning. These are reasons that the reasons why they bought it are the same things that you're going to use to try to sell this property. Okay. So what did you choose this? Why did you choose this home originally when you bought it? What were some of the features of this home that made you fall in love with it? Because I'm going to use that to hopefully market it to somebody else. On the flip side, what are the negative aspects of their home? Well, maybe this home is really close to the highway and we hear traffic. Maybe the backyard is very small and we can't have a fence. Find out the negative aspects, that they don't like about that home, and hopefully downplay those. What makes this home so special to you? What are some of the things that you've experienced with this home? Maybe you love the fact that it was an open floor plan and you can have big family gatherings and parties and things like that. Find out what makes this home special. Ask the seller what nearby landmarks do they frequent. Maybe they have a coffee shop that they walk to, or maybe it's a walking distance to their church or their school. Find out some of the nearby landmarks that the seller frequents, because that's what you're going to also use to sell the property. And then before you get done, make sure you find out, is the seller ready to list now, or are there additional repairs or updates that they want to do? If they're ready to get brand new carpeting because they think it's going to help sell the property, then maybe that's something you're going to want to talk to them about, and maybe get the property listed, right after the carpet is installed. So the next thing is, how are you going, or what are you going to bring with you to your presentation? So obviously this isn't going to be happening if we're doing a virtual presentation, but if we're in person with the seller and you're at their property, these are just basic information. A printed presentation, if you brought one on your iPad, it's nice to be able to have a printed presentation. You absolutely want to make sure you have business cards, a laptop or an iPad with you, a digital camera, or to be honest, all of our phones take just as good of cameras, because you may may want to take some initial photos. Let's say, for example, you're talking to the seller and the seller says to you, you know what, Katie, I love you. I really feel like you're going to be our listing agent. I want you to go ahead and list this property. Even though I might be sending a professional photographer out next week, I'm going to go ahead and get some initial photos so I can hopefully get this thing listed right away and get it in the MLS. Remember, if you put the properties in the MLS, we can always switch out those initial photos for professional ones later on. Your best investment to get as a listing agent is going to be your laser measuring tape. The last thing you want to do is have to bring somebody with you to measure room dimensions. Room dimensions are necessary when putting a property on the market. So go to Home Depot, buy yourself a $15 or $20 laser measuring tape, and it'll make your life much easier. Have a yard sign with you. If that seller says to you, Katie, I want to list the property, guess what I'm going to go get out of my trunk? I'm going to go get a yard sign because I hope to list that property, you know, of course, within 24 hours of putting the sign out. But if they're ready to list, I'm going to stick that sign in the yard. Electronic lockbox, and also listing documents, guys. If you have a seller and you're talking to them and they say to you, you know what, you've answered all of our questions. We absolutely feel like we have the confidence in you to list your home. I want to have those documents ready to go, right? So I may even bring copies of listing documents already filled out. I may even have them ready to go on my computer. So when I'm done with my virtual listing presentation and the seller tells me they're ready to go, I can literally digitally send those documents over to be able to get them to sign it. The last thing you want to do is have a seller that says to you, Katie, I'm going to go ahead and list with you. Thanks, Mr. Seller. I love that. Thanks for the opportunity. Let me go back to my office. I'll get back to you later tonight with that agreement. Who's to say they don't change their mind in those couple of hours? So if they're ready to go, get them to list the property, get those documents signed, and get the property on the market. Let's talk a little bit about pricing. You know, I like to do the range price strategy. We talked a little bit about that. You know, what's more important to you, money or time? One thing we'll always tell you is do not take a seriously overpriced listing. You know, it's one thing if the seller says to you, I want to list at 10,000 more than what the market value is telling us. That's understandable. You know what? We're going to list at 10,000 higher with the idea that over the course of the next couple of weeks, we look at the showings coming in. We may need to lower at 10,000 if that's the case. What you don't want is a property that's worth 200,000 and your seller is telling you that he wants 275 for it. We know we're not going to get 275 for this property. We know that when it's listed, you're not going to get any showings for this property. You're going to get very little. If you get any offers, they're not going to be for 275. They're going to be probably closer to the 200 market value. And it makes you look bad. You know, what happens when you take on a property that's overpriced is it tends after 6 months, it'll either expire or the seller will have gotten frustrated and withdrew it from the market and you know, away from the company. It makes you look bad because you're doing, first of all, you know, you don't really want to have an expired or withdrawn listing, but you also don't want to lose control of the situation. You know, take control of this aspect. This is your ability to take a listing. You do not have to take a listing just because a seller offers to give you their home for a listing. If I don't think I can sell the property at 275, why would I spend time, money, and effort over the next 6 months trying to sell a property that will not sell? I don't care if you get a couple buyers off it. I get that, but guys, you're not helping. Not only that, but you're doing a disservice to your seller. So what I like to say is I'd rather disappoint you now by not taking your overpriced listing than disappoint you 6 months from now when you come to me upset that your property hasn't sold and I tell you it's because of the price. So don't take an overpriced listing. Be realistic. You know, this is the way we have to use charts and visuals and data to get the message across that this is what we're doing. We're not making up these numbers out of thin air. We're using legitimate sales from our MLS to back up our information. So when you have that stubborn seller that says to you, I'm not going to take less than 275, it might be time for you to decide, you know what, maybe it's the best idea I don't take this listing, okay? Because you're not going to be able to sell it, okay? Also, let's talk a little bit about objections. You know, there's, you know, we have classes that we do on objections, and you're going to get them when you're talking to a seller. I like to think of objections as just unanswered questions. You know, it's something that for each objection, you treat each one of them individually. You overcome them. You ask about, you know, you move on and you ask for the listing. So here's an example. maybe the seller had some questions or concerns on the pricing. Maybe the numbers that you came up with were a lot less than what he was hoping to get for the property, but he understands it. And, maybe you had to explain to him that, sir, unfortunately, you put way more money into fixing up the property than we're going to be able to get back for you. So, Mr. Seller, or in this case, Mrs. Seller, now that we've discussed your concerns on the property, should I prepare the paperwork for your property to be listed today? So we've overcome the objection of the price, and now I'm going to ask for the listing. Again, you're going to take each objection. The most frequent objection you're going to get is going to be regarding commission. We work in a day and age where there's discount brokerages are out there that are doing listings for next to nothing. I like to think that they're taking business away from us that, legitimate full service brokerages have been, maintaining. However, that's an objection that we have to handle. So when you have that objection of a seller that says to you, Katie, I know you said you're, and I'm going to discuss commissions, but he said, Katie, I know that you said you can list the property for 6%. However, we want you to list it for 4%. We think 6% is too much. We want to list it for 4%. And maybe I negotiate a little bit, or maybe I just say no. There's a lot of agents out there, guys, that say no when we're asked to reduce our commission. Okay. One of the things I want you to keep in mind is when you go somewhere, let's say you go to a car dealership or you go anywhere, you can go to any commission-based, sales or anything. The old saying is, it doesn't hurt to ask. Every seller will ask you to reduce your commission because it doesn't hurt to ask, right? As we all want to ask, we all want to get a good deal. So if I go into, let's say I go to a flea market and I walk up to a flea market stand and I see something that I really like, a piece of artwork. And I say, hey, I know it says $100 on the ticket, but will you take 80? And the woman looks back at me and says, no, I'm sorry. I'm only going to get 100. I want 100 for this artwork. Guess what? I love it. I give her the $100 and I didn't get my $20 deal. It's okay to say no when somebody asks you to reduce your commission. They're always going to ask you. So other than commission, what is holding you back from listing with me today? Mr. Seller, I'm not going to reduce my commission. I do a lot and I invest a lot of time into each one of my listings. I give you my full and undivided attention. I do drone photography. I do professional photography. I do broker opens and open houses. Mr. Seller, I invest so much time and effort into this. There's no way I can do it for less than 6%. So other than commission, what is holding you back from listing with me today? We've isolated the objection and we've moved on. Another thing I like to do is also create a sense of urgency as far as getting on the market today. Mr. Seller, I can have your property syndicated to hundreds of real estate websites before this weekend if you'd like to go ahead and get the paperwork completed today. Every seller wants to have their house on hundreds of websites right away, right? So this is something that's enticing to them and they may want to go ahead and list with you right away. Another great way to ask for the close is to say, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, I'd like to schedule an open house for this weekend. Does that work for you? Again, they're excited at the notion that they could potentially have buyers walking into their house to look at the property. Now, I know this is a little bit different in today's times right now with COVID-19, but again, we're dealing with objections. So whatever the objection is, treat each one of them individually, go through them, find out if the seller is happy, are they satisfied with your answer? Let's move on. But don't be afraid to say no when somebody asks you to reduce your commission. Okay, they're always going to ask. Okay. Another important thing is, let's say now you have your appointment. You've gone through your pre-listing. You've talked to the seller. You've built rapport. You've done all the things you need to do. You've even asked for the close. Now what do? Well, the important thing is once you say goodbye to that seller, send them a thank you. This is something that we don't do a lot in our world anymore, and I think it's really important. Send a thank you. Let that seller know that, hey, I appreciate you taking me the hour today to meet with me. Thank you for allowing me into your home. I really appreciate talking with you and your husband today. Okay. I love the personal note cards. I think it's a great way of being personal without necessarily being a text or an email. But a phone call is appropriate. Whatever is your best choice. I like phone calls. I like, handwritten note cards. But the important thing is say thank you. A lot of agents don't do that. You'd be surprised how many listing agents or buyer's agents meet with customers and you don't thank them for their time. Guys, if you're meeting with a buyer, if they're meeting with you in Starbucks and they've set up the time, or a seller has welcomed you into their home, make sure you thank them. It will actually leave a really good impression on them about you. We don't do that enough. Every listing, if you can't be your number one, let you be their second choice. So Mr. Seller, I realize I did not get the listing today. I do appreciate you taking the time. However, if anything, if the property doesn't sell with the other agent or whatever, if you're not happy with it, but obviously we don't want to infringe on an active listing, but just tell them, hey, if I can't be your number one, I'd love to be your number two choice. So and also think of every listing appointment as a learning experience. If you're doing these virtually, or if you have somebody listening to you on the phone, allow somebody to critique you. Let them listen to you and tell you what you did wrong. Our Real Satisfied survey company even has a lost listing survey. So believe it or not, if you really have some thick skin, you can actually send a survey out to sellers that have chosen not to list their home with you to find out why you didn't get that listing. Maybe you didn't seem confident enough. Maybe your prices weren't backed up with enough data. Maybe you didn't ask the right questions. Maybe you didn't build rapport. Okay, so these are all things that you want to learn from your experience and hopefully do better the next time. You're gonna, there's gonna be a couple that you're just not gonna get. You're not gonna get every listing. You're not gonna get them all, but learn from the ones that you don't get so that you can do better next time. So with that said, just a couple things to summarize up. Make sure that when you get these listing appointments, always verify the appointment. Make sure that the seller knows that you're going to be there at 10 o'clock. Be prepared. Don't walk into any listing and presentation without being prepared. Have a presentation. Practice your approach. Practice your scripts. Practice your objection handling. Have a spouse be the bad guy, have them, throw objections at you about pricing and commissions and all these different things so that you can, deal with those and isolate those and overcome. My biggest pet peeve, as you know, is arriving on time and being calm. Nobody wants to work with somebody that's flustered and stressed and seems that they're not really in it. You want to be in the moment. You want to listen. You want to make eye contact and make sure that nothing else really matters right now except my phone call or my conversation with you, Mr. Seller. Make a good first impression and make sure to practice active listening, asking open-ended questions. Another thing we didn't talk too much about was building rapport. For a seller to list their home with you, they don't just have to believe in you professionally, but they have to like you personally, right? Because you're somebody they're going to be working with. So spend a little bit of time in getting to know the seller. Maybe you're both from New England. Maybe you both like the same football team, or maybe your kids go to the same school. Find some sort of commonality with the people that you're working with, because it's going to allow you to create those better relationships and more long-lasting and loyal relationships. When they know you as that, that fun person that, likes the same, baseball team as me, then they're going to, it's going to leave a good first impression. So not only just about real estate, but also get to know them and find out some commonalities. Handle each objection individually and move on to the next one. And last but not least is ask for the listing. If you come from a background of timeshare or vacation sales, then you're probably very well trained in how to ask for the close. We don't do that enough here in real estate. We need to ask buyers, are you ready to write a contract on this property today? Mr. Seller, from what I can gather, I've answered all the questions that you had for me today. I've presented you with a great list price. Is there anything holding you back from listing with me today? No? Okay, let's get the listing paperwork done. Okay, so ask for that listing. That's it, guys. I am so good at time. I'm closing up at 10:59, so I really appreciate it. Do we have any questions? Is there anything I didn't cover? Let me look at the conversations. Okay, so a great question. How do you reject a listing without being rude? you're not going to look rude. In fact, if anything, you look like the more professional. So in this case, Mr. Seller, I understand you think your property is worth $275. From my experience and from my knowledge and from doing all my research, I'm showing that the property is only worth about $200,000. While I welcome you, the chance to list your property on the MLS, I don't think I can do you a service to get that 275 of what you want. So I'm going to kindly say that I'm not going to take your listing. I think maybe you would be better off with somebody that can get that 275 that you're after. If you do it that way, it almost makes you look more professional because now you're looking like the expert. Mr. Seller, I'm not so desperate that I'm going to take an overpriced listing. I'm telling you that you're unrealistic on your pricing. I'm the professional, and I kindly am going to not take your listing because I don't think I'm going to be able to sell it. Not to mention that I don't get paid until I have a closing, and I don't want to spend 6 months marketing a property that never is going to sell. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so what if you have a buyer for that listing and you're representing both sides? Do you ask for 6%? Well, that's between you and the seller. If you already have a buyer for the property, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm a seller and you come to me and you want to list the property, you've already got a buyer, guess what? You just earned your 6%. You brought me a buyer right away. So I'd be more than happy to give you that 6%. But that's a conversation you can have with your seller. Sometimes agents work out situations where they'll take a little bit of a reduced price if they find the buyer themselves. But that's a conversation you want to have with them. But definitely don't ever discount yourself. If a seller tells you, I want you to take 4%, don't just take 4%. Make sure they understand that you're splitting that with another agent on the other side of the transaction. You're doing work. Your broker has to make some money. You all have to pay the government. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's not just I'm getting 3%. I'm getting 3% minus, minus, minus. So make sure your seller knows that you're not getting 6%. You're getting 3%, with all these left. So thank you, everybody. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end here. And I have this recorded, so if you need a copy of it, feel free to reach out. And good luck, guys. But do those presentations. There's nothing that says you can't be doing these listing presentations remotely, especially with a system like Toolkit CMA. Thanks, guys. Take care.